Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
So can I start out with your name and the name of the organization?
It's Roy Speckhardt at the American Humanist Association. I'm its executive director.
Well, that's great. Can I ask you, what are the concerns and objectives for the American Humanist Association?
The American Humanist Association has a wide range of issue priorities. We do want to raise the profile of people who are non-theist and dispel prejudice against those of us in order to, is a prerequisite of sorts to dealing with lots of other issues that we care about, everything from choice and end-of-life choices to issues of individual rights to trying to lift up those who need help.
So, Roy, if I can call you Roy, your story in particular, were you raised religious?
Well, I did receive Catholic upbringing, although it was very liberal. I'm from upstate New York, where Catholicism is rabidly conservative, as I've seen it south of the Mason-Dixon line. However, it's still there. It's still Catholicism. And over the course of my years, I kind of drifted away from it. In fact, when I was in high school, I realized that I wasn't crazy about how the Pledge of Allegiance went, and I wouldn't stand for it and was sent to the principal for it.
So, have you ever experienced religious intolerance?
I haven't personally experienced significant religious intolerance. Sure, I run against people who are intolerant of my beliefs, and because I do interviews in certain circles, you might call that religious intolerance. I mean, I've been threatened every which way, you know, and sometimes in ways that are unfortunate. I know I was on a radio station that was local to my home, where the host was basically saying that people like me shouldn't exist, and that there should be something done about this. And I was starting to get worried that this is personally
What should be done, yeah.
But then it was softened a little bit because he said that I would get mine after I died. As long as I wait till after I'm dead, then I'm all right.
That I don't know. That's pretty...
So yes, I've experienced some religious intolerance, but only because of my involvement.
As far as what led you, so I guess you would describe yourself. You're not religious, so you're an atheist, and most of the people in the association are atheists.
Yes, most of the people who are members of the American Humanist Association are atheists, and they would identify that way. However, a lot of people in our group also are definitionally atheists, but don't choose to use that word. So they don't believe in God. They're non-theistic, a lot of people would say.
So you personally, what led to your, the question is like, what led to your atheism? Was it lack of belief in biblical stories? Was it lack of scientific evidence of the existence of God? Or was it, religious intolerance? Like, what do you think led to your...
Right. Well, I mean, for me, it was just a gradual process. I learned about different faiths and realized Catholicism didn't have all the answers. And in fact, some stuff in there looked like it contradicted each other. And why is this evil existing when there's this all-powerful God that could get rid of it? Basic questions like that made me think Catholicism wasn't right. And then as I learned more, I went to college and learned about ancient Western civilization and how some of the biblical stories that we've heard about were not made up, but were not developed during the times that they were supposed to have been developed. And in fact, like some of the flood-related items were stories made up by Mesopotamians who, knew they were making up stories when they did it. They didn't pretend like this was was truth when they made up these stories, and then they were adopted and changed to be Christian stories, and obviously that must not be true.
Kind of like if the writer of Spider-Man,
right.
If 1,000 years from now someone watched the DVD and thought it happened.
Exactly. It's sort of ridiculous that we would think such stories were true. And at first, when I discovered that that they weren't all false, and that most of what I'd been taught in the religious side of things was mythology, I was upset. I thought, how could people be trying to shove this fake material down my throat that is obviously not true, and shouldn't they be adult enough to realize that this is garbage? But that anger subsided, and I realized that, okay, I don't believe, and many people like me don't believe. What do I do next? And so that what do I do next led me to work here at the American Humanist Association eventually.
Now, have you made up your mind that there is, I guess, could a God exist? Have you made up your mind that there is no God? Are you open to...
I don't believe that there's a possibility that the Christian God exists. The idea of what is God means something different to everybody, because everybody has a different concept of what God is, right? And so, but the concept that has been explained in Christian mythology of what God is, clearly that's not true. The evidence just points every which way but that. Could there be some kind of higher power that is involved in the universe in some way? Maybe. It doesn't seem likely. The evidence doesn't point in that direction. I don't believe that that's true. But so I'm slightly agnostic in the sense that, sure, my mind's open to learning more, but I just think it's very unlikely.
When we talk about the future, sometimes it seems that things are getting better. It seems that there are more skeptic people out there. It seems that, even in the media, people like a Richard Dawkins get a voice, and there seems to be more scientific pursuits, and there certainly seems to be more skepticism. But at the same time, in nations in East Asia, sometimes, certainly like in Pakistan or Iran, and now I don't live there, so I can't really say, but it does seem like sometimes there are millions of people that are being brought up with very intolerant views.
Right.
And so the question is, overall, do you think things are getting better or worse?
I think we're moving forward in the right direction. I think we are experiencing some backslides here and there. We're experiencing backlashes against the successes that we've had. The religious right and those in conservative religious spheres see what we're doing, are upset about it, and are fighting back. I mean, that's why our efforts on choice for women have been threatened in many different areas in the U.S. So even though in the U.S. we've seen great gains for non-theists in every which way, in the public, in the numbers, and especially among young people, we are seeing backlashes here. And worldwide, there's lots of growth left to occur. We haven't gotten to the place worldwide where people respect people whether or not they happen to believe in a God. We've got a long way to go to get to that point. Yes, we've experienced progress, but a long way to go.
It's funny that you brought up an afterlife before, like you're going to pay for it in the afterlife. Without there being judgment or an afterlife, if it's accurate that when we die, that's it, could someone get away with a crime? Would it be better if there was, would it be better if there was some type of an afterlife and there was some justice afterwards? Say I picked your pocket today, or and throughout history there have been murderers who haven't gotten caught. Would it be better if there was some type of afterlife where, maybe not forever, but for a certain amount of time they could be punished or whatever?
I don't think so. I think that, not only is there no evidence of any afterlife, any tangential ideas that lead people to thinking that there's an afterlife are easily countered by the fact that it would change everything we know about how science works for there to be some kind of part of ourselves that lives on beyond us. It's just farcical. But whether it'd be a good idea if such a thing existed, I still have skepticism about that. This is our only life, the one we've got. And if we don't try to assume that it's going to be corrected in a later time, and we address what we have today, then the today will be better and improved as a result. So a focus on this life is actually good for ourselves and for society. And so that's better than expecting it to get picked up in the next life. That probably won't happen anyway.
Well, that's a very good point. Just one more note on that. Say you and I know someone who passes away, and say they were not too old, and sure. it's certainly it's very sad when someone dies young, especially a child or something. Would it be I don't mean to ask you the same question, but have you ever thought like maybe it would be better, you know, if you know a good person and they pass away, would it be better if there was some heaven for them to go to or something like that?
Well, I think that, you know, the comforting feeling people get in thinking about their loved ones in a better place, you know, exists. And, you know, and we don't have that for atheists and agnostics. Instead, we have to have comfort in knowing that any suffering that they did experience is gone, and that we can celebrate the memory of who they were when they were here, when they were making a difference in the only life that really matters. And that's how I prefer to view it.
Why do you think people take offense when you question their religious beliefs? This is one of the things that a lot of people have been asking me what got my interest, and I still haven't really decided whether I'm an atheist or whether I'm going to go back to Catholicism as you were. But what really got me thinking, you see, I started to think about things and I started to question, and I started to say, well, maybe this isn't true, but this is true. And sometimes I would notice with people when you, like, say the story of Noah's Ark, for example, I would tell people maybe it was a smaller flood or maybe it didn't happen, and people would get very angry with me. How could, you know, they'd even threaten that I was going to suffer in the afterlife. You know, maybe I'll meet up with you, but why do you think people take offense when you question their religious beliefs?
I think it's foundational. There's lots of comfort and support system in their personal beliefs. And so when you suggest, that even, you know, I've been told that our motto, good without a God, is offensive. Just saying that we're good without a God is offensive. And I think the reason people perceive it as offensive is because if it's possible to be good without a God, then that means that God isn't necessarily the source of goodness, which challenges everything about what they believe. And so even that simple statement cuts to the core of their beliefs. And if one piece of their belief is broken, then doesn't the whole house of cards fall down? And it does for some people who are thinking people, and those are the ones that are more likely to be upset.
Did you ever personally deal with fear of hell, or not even that, but like sometimes when people do decide to leave their religion, and the other atheists I've spoken to, they've talked about this, that some people think there's going to be like a penalty in their fate, even if they are almost convinced that the religion is wrong. You know, it still scares them that someone told them, you know, you're going to pay for this. Like, did you ever deal with either that or a fear of hell?
I think people tend to get over that fear pretty quickly. Most people I know, so for instance, my partner Maggie Ardiente, you know, I remember her saying one of the big surprises for her was when her Catholic parents divorced, and she thought, well, that's against what's in the Bible, so shouldn't there be some kind of judgment immediately? Nothing seemed to happen. And then she thought, well, you know, maybe I should test this out and, you know, curse God and see what happens. Well, nothing happened. I guess there really isn't one. I don't have to worry. And, you know, so, you know, it doesn't take too much trial and error to realize that judgment isn't forthcoming.
Well, I had another question I wanted to run by, and I do ask this to all of my, you know, you're from New York, I'm from New Jersey, we both, I'm sure September 11th certainly had an impact on both of us. I remember I had a friend who was an atheist, and I don't mean to jump back to the topic of an afterlife, but he was talking about the Muslims who think that if they blow themselves up, they're going to be rewarded with virgins.
Right.
And he was saying, you know, they don't even get a chance to be disappointed, you know, because he too believed when you die, you're just dead. And, you know, a question I would always ask him, like, don't you wish I mean, maybe there's a different type of an afterlife, or maybe when you die you get maybe a minute of wisdom or something, like, and then you die. Like, do you ever wish that people could learn, you know, that they were wrong about whatever?
You know, you wish that people could realize their mistakes, although I never wish it after they die. I wish it before they die, so they can actually do something about it. It never occurs to me to wish after they die that they figure things out, since that doesn't seem to have any practical advantage. So I hope, and I do what I can to explain to people how things really work, so that they can make better judgments today in ways that affect people in a positive way and can really move things forward, as opposed to finding out when it's too late to do anything about it.
Should we maintain religious freedom?
Definitely. Religious freedom is essential. People should have the right to believe or not believe as they see fit, and when that's infringed upon, it's a slippery slope to infringing upon my own beliefs.
It's very interesting, and because most atheists, and in fact I haven't met one that wanted to take religious freedom away. They all want to maintain it. It's very interesting. They will have they'll talk about how religion is harmful, but we still want to maintain religious beliefs, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I find that in fact, when I talk to very conservative religious people, they're often surprised to find that I would object to teaching atheism in the public schools. They'd say, well, you know, you say atheism isn't a religion, so why would you object to atheism being taught in public schools? That's how you believe, right? But I do object to it because it answers a religious question. And we shouldn't be having government involved in answering religious questions. That's not why we have a government.
That is very interesting. When people talk about their moral character, a lot of times someone will say, you know, for example, I'm waiting to have sex until marriage because it's in the Bible, right? And I'm sure you've studied the Bible.
They don't say that too long.
I'm sure you've, you know, and I have probably over this last year, I've took a religious studies course, and I've been learning about the Bible, and there's a lot of crazy stuff in it, you know.
Sure.
In Exodus 21, it talks about what to do with your slave, and you know, then there is murder. There is in Revelation, there's like a 7-headed dragon and everything. So, why do we think, or why do you think people identify their moral, like doing the right thing because of the Bible?
Well, they've been taught that that's the case. They've been taught that the Bible is the source of morals, which of course it isn't, because it was made at a time when morality was conceived of in a very different way. I mean, when you think about Steven Pinker's book over there, The Better Angels of Our Nature, where he talks about how the course of humankind has been going less and less violent, despite what we see in the media. And the violent and ignorant world in which the Bible was written is not the world that we have today. I mean, and so the idea that that could be a source of morality and wisdom is obviously flawed. However, it persists because that is what these religions are based upon. They use the Bible as their foundational work, and they say that it is their source of moral and goodness, and so people do believe it for a certain amount of time, hopefully not for their whole lives.
Would you ever want to teach a religious studies class, and you want to maintain that we should learn about the religions?
I think it's worthwhile to learn about religion. I think I have taught about humanism in university level. However, I do have great hesitation about teaching about religion in high school and lower levels. And the reason why is because it'll be different in different places. So for instance, I think the idea of a moment of silence at the beginning of a school day seems pretty innocuous. Nothing wrong with sitting and thinking about life for a minute or two. However, how is that moment of silence going to play out in New York City? Not a problem. How is it going to play out in rural Kentucky? Probably it's going to be a problem. The teachers there will see it as an opportunity to lead with prayer. There are plenty of places in this country where the entire classroom will all, but maybe one person, be of the same exact faith. And they'll all, so if they engage in prayer during a moment of silence, or they teach this religious studies course in a way that's biased toward a particular faith, no one will have a problem with it in that classroom, except maybe one or two people who will be seriously offended and put in a difficult situation inappropriately. And so we don't want government to get involved in that as a general rule. And when they do, it should really be done in a way that's very clearly defined, so that we can't have it misused all over the country, where it surely will.
Would it surprise you if it ended up that there was a God? Like, say scientists run into it, or it manifests, or when we die we meet it, as some people think. Would it surprise you?
Yes, especially some kind of personified one. I think that's it's not even in my brain as a possibility at this time.
Because Sam Harris throws out like hypotheticals like die or something. He, you know, sometimes he, and of course he doesn't believe in it, but he you know, he thinks about it and everything. I mean, is there any type of situation, you know, supernatural that you've ever thought about or whatever?
When I think, if I experience a supernatural event, such as, you know, God telling me to do something, or seeing, you know, the sea parted in front of me, my first thought is not going to be, ah, there is a God. My first thought is going to be, did I take some kind of drugs or something? Or, you know, have I lost my sanity? I need to go see somebody, you know, like, just my experiencing an unexplainable event is not enough for me to believe in God. It needs to be far greater than that for me to be convinced.
As far as, it basically comes down to, we're trying to answer the question, how did the universe start?
Sure.
That's basically the question. And I believe it was Carl Sagan who said it could be eternal. But it's pretty difficult, you know, it's pretty amazing to think, you know, like time, like when did it start and what
Right.
was before then?
What was before the Big Bang, you know,
exactly, what was before the Big Bang?
whatever billion years ago.
So then what was there 20 billion? I mean, so how do we approach these questions?
Yeah, I mean, certainly science can keep exploring them, and the more it knows about what happened at that moment when the universe was born, the more we might hypothesize what happened before then. However, although Stephen Hawking indicates that we can't know what happened before then, and the very nature of how the universe was born is going to mean that we won't be able to figure it out. But who knows, maybe science will get some more exploration in that area. And I think it's fine to think about those things, but to ascribe a God, say God did it, just because we don't know the answer, is a cop-out.
I do ask this question to all of it's. I don't know how it's going to go over with you, but I do ask everyone this question. A lot of religious people, when they're doing whatever they're doing, they think that this is God's plan for me, and many people have thought, you know, many people have done things and thought, you know, God sent me to do this, right? Have you ever thought that? Like, maybe God actually is a humanist. Maybe God doesn't really want us to worry about religious, you know, routines and or what your neighbor's doing. Maybe God just wants us to love each other and do whatever humanism wants. So have you ever thought maybe this is God's plan for you?
I have not thought that, mostly because that would require there being this kind of personified God, this God that is involved on a day-to-day basis, that picks out people for special missions. That kind of involved God, the evidence really indicates, does not exist.
What would you want religious people, like, say someone, because for me personally, I spent most of my life, I didn't really question it, and just that really in the last two to 3 years is when I've been questioning. And if you met me 5 years ago, I probably would have been a happy churchgoer. Like, if someone is a churchgoer and they're just in the initial stages of looking at stuff, what do you want them to do? Like, say they could give you a half an hour of their time to read whatever you want, or to...
Sure. Well, I think for them, for somebody who still identifies with a particular faith, but is doubting some of the philosophical underpinnings or the questions about the supernatural, I'd say, well, explore those doubts and consider the possibility that you could, you know, retain your community involvement in your faith and also be an atheist and a humanist. I mean, that's possible. You don't have to give up your family and your way of life in order to become a humanist and an atheist. You could just decide, well, I don't believe in God, but I do like going to these sermons and they're pretty fun, and well, if that's what you like, go for it. You know, there's no rules. You know, no one has to follow a certain set of rules to become a humanist or an atheist. That's one of the nice things about it.
No, you're right, and that's something that Matt Dillahunty explained, that, like, you know, for example, in Catholicism, we expect other Catholics to be pro-life, but
right,
an atheist, right, it's just the one thing, and then you could disagree on everything else. At this point in the interview, if you wanted to ask me any questions, I allow that.
Okay. Well, I hope that you're getting a sense of our community from the top, from a lot of people who are involved. And how many people have you interviewed so far?
Let's see, about 5 or 6.
Okay, well, that's a good start. Yeah.
And I'm seeing Mr. Silverman next week, as I mentioned before.
Right. Yeah, we agree on a lot of things, not everything, but Dave is doing some great work over at American Atheist, and I'm sure you'll get some good comments from him too. I don't have any burning questions, but I thank you for
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you too. I'm gonna turn that. Yeah, but thank you very much, Mr. Speckhardt. Yeah, and I'll certainly be looking into the American Humanist Association.
Great.